Okay, so this is going to be an introduction to Webpack and how to set it up. And there's two modules that we're going to use. One of the modules that we want to use, we want to be able to basically have an HTML page and have it load a JavaScript file. So we're going to need some kind of web server to serve our index.html file. I've already got it installed on here, but I'll put it here for the sake of the video. Npm Install HTTP server. Okay. Now this is one that you probably are going to install globally. So again, this is also a little bit of an introduction into Node. Okay. When you see npm install, we're going to look at Node. We're actually installing a Node package. I'm assuming people have Node installed on their machines. If not, make sure that you install it. Install a later version. It's very, very easy to install. So when I do this, it's going to go out and it's going to get this package. And I'll just show you something interesting that you could do. I've installed it just for the sake of argument. If I go over here and I say which HTTP server, it'll actually tell me the path where it's installed. Just so you know that it's not magic. It's actually just installing some JavaScript file somewhere on your machine. Now, since I ended up installing HTTP server globally, what that allows me to do is actually right from the command line, I could say HTTP server. And what this does is it opens up a web server. It's a very dumb web server. In fact, if I go to this port here and I go over here and I open up Chrome, let me give myself a new window, and I go over here and I paste this in. It'll tell me, hey, look, I'm looking for a file called index. That's what it's going to look for by default. And it's not actually saving it. My guess here is that it's probably showing me any files that are in this directory. We could test this out really quick. If I went over here and I said touch foo.js, which basically just creates an empty file, and I went back here again, and I opened this up again. Now it's basically just giving me a directory listing. This is a very simple server, just to have a server. Normally, our server is going to be Express, but we're not really doing anything with Express other than we want to basically open up an HTML file. Well, if we want to open up an HTML file, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to touch index.html. By default, this is what will end up getting opened. I'm just going to go to the editor of my choice, and I'm going to go over here. And I'll go in here, and in my editor, I'm going to put some very basic HTML. Okay? At some point, we're going to do some work with HTML and the DOM. But for now, you've probably, maybe you haven't, but this is probably the most basic HTML page I could have.
This is being recorded?
Yes. And if I go over here and I say, so don't curse or anything, and I go over here and I click hello, and I go back here and I reload this. Again, the way that this server works, it'll automatically serve, although I think I killed it. Let me start it again. So by putting in HTTP server, and I'm going to go back here, and I should see that hello page end up popping up. Nothing earth-shattering here.
Did Control-C?
Yeah, I did Control-C. So whenever I start this, if I want to kill it, Control-C will end up killing it. Now, what I want to do is I want to use ES6. I mean, by the way, nothing would prevent me, just for the sake of argument. I'm going to start this again, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to do a script tag, and I'll say source equals foo.js. And in my foo file, I'm going to go over here, and I'll say console.log foo. And I'll go back here, and I'll reload this, and I'll open up my developer tools, which are over here. So now I've got both these things open. And if I go over here and I reload this, I'll see foo will end up popping up. Nothing earth-shattering going on here. This is basically just an HTML page with a script tag. People have seen this sort of thing before. This is not earth. It could be if you never saw it before. That's fine. There's just a web server that's serving up a page. Now, what I really want to be able to do is I want to be able to use ES6 and I want to be able to use Webpack. Why might I want to do that? Well, one thing is that if I had a bunch of files here, maybe I also have a file called bar. And if I added bar, I would have to go up here. I'd have to do that. And if I went in here, I would say console.log bar. And if I went over here, I would see both foo and bar show up. Webpack does a couple of different things. We're going to use Webpack because you're going to have to use Webpack when you start using React. So I want you to see it as early as possible. I don't want that to be a piece that you don't understand when we end up getting to that. The other thing is that it gives me the ability to do things like using ES6. So let's talk a little bit about how Webpack works. The way that Webpack works is, first of all, I have to go and I have to install Webpack. Now, I could install Webpack globally. The reason why I'm not going to install Webpack globally is that, let's say that I wanted to go ahead and deploy this site somewhere, which I can do. I might have a need for Webpack when I go to deploy it, because what Webpack is actually going to do is Webpack is going to take my files and output a result. It's going to transpile my files into ES6 syntax, and it's also going to stitch all my files together. Why might you want to do that? Well, you might have 1,000 files that are spread out. You might need all the functionality in those 1,000 files. Okay? Webpack will bundle them all together for you and make it one file. So if someone's on a mobile device or on something else, you could take that file, you could minify everything. Okay? You don't have to look into that file. You don't care what the output of that file is. You only care that it works. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to npm install. Again, you're going to see this when we end up looking at Node as well. I'm going to do an install, and I'm going to install Webpack. Okay? And let me actually do one other thing that I did forget to do. I'm going to also end up using, I want to end up running some commands. And in order to do that, there's an easy way that I could actually set up some commands by putting what's called a package JSON file in here. I could go and create that package JSON file manually if I want to, but if I want to create it, I could actually say npm, just the same way you say git init, I could say npm init. This is something you're going to do constantly because you're going to create a lot of Node projects. Every time you do it, npm init. And I could go through the long way and by doing this, and it's going to ask me some questions. What do you want to call this? What version? Blah, blah, blah. And if I do ls.alt, I'll see that not only do I have my files here, but I've also got my package JSON file. If I went and looked at my package JSON file, I would see that it has some stuff in here. By the way, there's a command that I could run right off the bat by saying, going in here, you see I have a script tag here. So the way that this works is that if I say npm test, this will automatically look in the package JSON file and run that script under tests. And it'll just echo out no test specified exit 1, which looks very much like this. Okay? I could add my own. These are called npm scripts. I could have one called foo. And I could say echo. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's see. Fizzbuzz. I know they're escaping out the quotes. I'm going to see if this works. Might not. Now, test is actually a special name for a script. If I say npm foo, it won't end up finding it. But if I say npm run foo, it'll find it. And you see it echoes out fizzbuzz. Okay? I could copy this, call this bar. The bottom line is that this gives me a place, and maybe I didn't even need the quotes. I guess you need it if you have spaces there. And I'll go npm run bar. Right? Echoed out bar. Okay? Not terribly useful. It's telling me what the script is, and then it's performing the script. I'll just show you one other thing. If I just do npm run, it shows me all my available scripts. So if I forgot what scripts I had, it says, well, you have one called foo, you have one called bar, you have one called test. Okay?
So you did, in this My Silly Project directory, npm init, which gave you this JSON.
It gave me this package JSON file, correct.
And the point of that was that now I can create these
little scripts, but something else. There's something else that's important too. Remember I told you I was going to install Webpack? What will happen here, once you end up installing things locally, notice if I do an ls alt, I don't have any directories here. Okay? But now I'm going to do an npm install Webpack. Okay? And I'm going to put, and by default, if you don't put a G, it does it locally. And plus, I'm doing save. Right? What is save going to end up doing? Let's do this, just so you can see it.
Eric, just one thing. You mentioned something about putting it, not installing globally, right?
Installing it locally. So but I haven't shown you what that is yet. I'm going to show you what that is now. Okay? The -g flag stores it locally. That's why if I said which HTTP server, you would see that this is not in this project. It's somewhere else. Okay? And I'm going to go over here. Let me do this too. Do a git repo. Git init, git.add, git.commit, .m commit. Okay? Now I'm going to go over here. So if I do git.status, it tells me you're good. Everything's committed. Okay? I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say git.add. I'm going to say npm install. And this is going to be my Webpack. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to tell you why I'm saving it in a second. It's going to go out and it's going to get Webpack. Webpack is going to be the thing that's going to be able to pack our files up. Again, nothing to do with data structures or anything like that. Just a technology that you should get comfortable with early on so it doesn't trip you up later.
And you have to have this server running to do that. So
I don't have to have the server running to do it. They're totally different.
I was going to get it. So it knew it. When you said npm Webpack,
It could basically, npm goes up to the npm org or wherever the npm global repos are and ends up getting it. That's actually important to note too. I didn't say that. So there's this magic place where all those repos are. That means if I wanted to create a repo called Webpack, I wouldn't be able to do it. It would say that name's already taken. I could call it Profs Webpack or something like that. Okay.
I wasn't sure whether you linked. You were linking the server with this.
No, it's as long as if I didn't have a connection to the internet, this wouldn't work. I'd be dead in the water. Okay. So I'm going to go over here. If I say git.status, okay, this is very interesting. It's telling me package JSON has changed. If I see a git.diff, the only thing that's changed about it is it's added a dependency to Webpack. Okay. I just want you to see one other thing. If I say git alt, ls, alt, notice that there's this folder called node modules, okay, that Git is ignoring. If I go over here and I look in that node modules folder, I'll see a ton of stuff in here. Okay? Why is Git ignoring it? Well, I have a global Git file, a git ignore file that I set up that says never, ever, ever include node modules in a GitHub project. And the reason why no one ever includes their node modules in a GitHub project is because Webpack is not mine. I didn't write it. Okay? Why would I fill up my repo with all this stuff? Okay? It's a known thing. If you go to get my repo, the first thing that you do is you say npm install and you get Webpack. Let me just show you this if you don't believe me. And then we'll get into Webpack. But you're seeing some npm stuff. Again, I'll go over this a few times. You realize it takes a little explanation before you get into Webpack. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say rmrf node modules. Okay? And I go back over here and it's gone. If I go back here and I say npm install, it looks in that package JSON file, goes up to the internet. The only one that I put in there was Webpack. It's going to go and get it, and I'm back in business. Okay? Again, when I have my repo, if I'm pulling in a bunch of other libraries, that's fine. It's open source. But But why bloat my code with those libraries? If someone doesn't know to do npm install, you put it in your README file and you say, hey, look, put npm install in, do npm install. Most developers know to do that. And now if I went back here, I'm going to be back in business with all this stuff. Okay? So now let's talk about Webpack. Okay? I'm going to put a task in here. One of the things that you'll see here, and this is not obvious, but if you looked at the Webpack documentation, you'd see that if you went into Webpack, for most of these that have executables, there's a bin folder, and within the bin folder, there's an executable file called webpack.js. That's an executable file. We don't think of JavaScript files as executable files, but they are. Okay? Node can execute files. That might as well be an exe file. When we run that through Node, that's going to do something. Well, how do I run that? I'm going to go back here. I know some of this might seem a little confusing, but I'm going to go back here. Okay? There's nothing that prevents me from creating a script called Webpack. I know this path because I've done this 1,000 times. Node modules, you'll know it too. Webpack, bin, Webpack, JS. Okay? Now I can run the command. Again, I have to do run because test is special. Okay? Webpack isn't. Okay? And this is my Webpack script. My Webpack script is using the Webpack program. I'm going to save this for you. It's all on the video. You could see it. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say npm run Webpack. Okay? I get an error message. And the error message says Webpack is very specific. Webpack needs two things. Okay? It needs an input and an output. It needs to know Webpack starts in one spot and outputs a file. That one spot that it starts in can bring in other files. Okay? So I'm going to start setting up Webpack. Well, how do I set up Webpack? Well, you would know this. You could look at the documentation for this. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to set up a Webpack specific name .config.js. Okay? There's only two main settings that I need here. Okay? Now, when we do Node, you're going to realize that the way that you end up exporting things out of a file is through something called module.exports. Okay? Again, not a ton of code, probably a little bit more than you can memorize, but if you go through this a few times, you'll get it. I need an entry point. My entry point is going to be source.index.js. Doesn't exist yet. Okay, I'm going to create it. My output, and again, why the /? Because I'm saying this is local. It's not from the root drive. This is local, just /. Okay? For the output, I'm going to go over here. The output's going to be an object. Okay? The output needs two things. It needs a path. That's the same as a directory. I'm going to say /dist. Why dist? We call that distribution. Okay? Again, it's going to pack my files up. What do I want the name of my file to be? I'll say file name. By default, most people, when they use Webpack, since Webpack is a bundler, they call their file bundle. Okay? Now I've got a Webpack config. Tricky? Write it a couple of times. You know you need an entry. You know you need an output. Did I remember, is it path or directory? Is it file name? Is N supposed to be capitalized? You do it a few times, you remember it. Go over here. Now I'm going to run this command again. And I get a different error message. It says I can't find source.index. Okay? So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to create a source file. I'm going to modify it. I'm going to create index.js. And I want you to notice something. Actually, this even got created the last time I ran it. It actually created the directory dist. I didn't create that. If I go over here, run this again, it's going to run. And there's a whole bunch of crap in here, but this is how Webpack works, and Webpack is going to let us do some interesting things. What Webpack does is it's going to let us write code that you'll find that writing Node code is a lot more pleasant than writing code for the browser. Okay? Node has this require system where we can end up importing files. Okay? The browser doesn't. Webpack basically lets us use the same features, and Webpack behind the scenes takes it, turns it into regular code. Okay? Now, one of the things that I might want to do with Webpack is I might want to use ES6. So if I wanted to use ES6, maybe I'd go in here and I would say something like class foo. In fact, it would just look like this. So in ES6 syntax, instead of having a constructor function, again, I don't expect you to see this, know this. Instead of putting something on the prototype, it looks like this. A different syntax, no colons. And what this should allow me to do is something like f equals new foo, f dot say hi. What would it look like in non-ES6? Function foo. Foo dot prototype, say hi, function. So this would be the non-ES6, and this would be the ES6. Okay? Let me just bring up one other thing. Webpack, when you run it, has a flag. It's got a flag called the watch flag, -w. That means that it's going to sit there. Damn it. Let's try. Oh, you know what? I did something incorrectly. So I want to pass the -w to the underlying command. So if I want to pass it to the underlying command, this is actually just passing it to the run command. If I want to pass it to the underlying command, --w.
What's that mean?
That means that instead of, what it's going to do is it's going to take this watch flag and it's going to pass it to the underlying command that's run. It's going to pass it in, since the underlying command that we have in there is actually the webpack.js file, it's going to pass it to the webpack.js executable. Okay? I know that's a little bit confusing. In fact, I just screwed it up just now. But if I do that, it'll end up sitting there and watching. And notice if I end up going back here, and I go to my bundle, and I go down to my bundle, okay, it's still ES6 code. Now, this might work totally fine. How would we know that it worked? Well, if I go back into my index.html file, instead of using foo.js, I'm going to say dist.bundle.js. Okay? And if I go back here and I start my server, and I'll go over here and I'll run this. Now, one of the problems that you have here, notice that this isn't changing. One of the problems that I'm having here is that the HTTP server thinks it's doing me a favor by caching. I don't want it to cache. Okay? It's actually the server is caching my old files. That's why you see the hello show up, and you see, well, maybe that is right, actually. I'm going to show you what happens if it does cache. Maybe this is exactly what it's supposed to do. Let me try to make it cache. I'm going to go over here and do this, and I'll rerun this. Now you can see it's caching. I changed it to 2 eyes. Okay? So one thing that you might want to do, and again, this is not something you have to memorize, but look at the docs for HTTP server. There's a flag for caching. Okay, and this I'm just running directly, so I don't have to have the double dashes. I'm going to cache, and the setting says if there's a -1, it won't do any caching at all. Again, this is not stuff that you totally have to know, but if you're going to use HTTP server, it's helpful.
You have to clear your cache.
Oh, you're right. No, you know, it's not the cache that's clearing. You know what the problem is? What I really want it to do? What I really want to have happen under the covers is I wanted to run my server, and I also wanted to watch my Webpack files, okay? So I'm going to do a command, and then we're going to do the ES6 relatively quickly. And again, I'm going to go through this more than once. If you're not getting it, is okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another task. There's nothing that prevents you from going in and combining tasks. And I'm going to call this serve dev. Why serve dev? Well, this is just in my development environment. If I was going to deploy this, and I could deploy it, and I will deploy it on another video up to Heroku or something like that, where we'd have it on a real server, I might just want to serve. But here I'm saying I want to serve in my development environment. Well, what do you want to do when you serve in your development environment? I'm going to do HTTP server. Well, let me actually do this. When I go to serve, I want to run Webpack, okay? And I want to pass to it the watch flag, okay? So when I run my server, because I'm running in development, every time I make a change, I want it to make a change to, I want it to redo my Webpack file, because that's what I'm testing with, okay? Shouldn't say testing. That's what I'm doing when I reload my browser, okay? And also I want to, okay? Now, when you put these commands together, notice that I have only one end, okay? The reason why I have only one end is that if you have two ends, it'll basically wait for the previous command to finish. This previous command can't finish, it's watching. It'll be stuck there forever. So I'm basically saying do these two things simultaneously. Run the command, and also I want you to start the server, HTTP server. We've got this installed globally, luckily. And I also, when we do this, I want to set this so it's not going to be caching. Once I end up doing that, and I go over here and I say npm run start dev, npm run, let's see if I named it wrong, serve dev. I actually meant start, apologize. npm run start dev. This will now run both these things. Notice my server is running. And now if I go back here and I run this, I'll see hi. If I go back here and I change this to buy, actually that was incorrect, right?
Yeah, it's probably still in your cache, right?
Why would it still be in my
Because
cache?
you're still going to the same server rather than
All right, I did a hard reload. Let me do this one more time. Now it seems to be catching it.
what's the normal length of the cache from when you first did it with Webpack?
That's probably what you're right. When I first did it, it probably was, yeah, you're right. It probably was, my browser was caching it. Right, so if you ever need to do that, just do a hard reload, Command Shift R. You know that that's a caching issue. Okay. So now we've got Webpack working, right? But if we go and look at this file is not very ES6-like, okay? In fact, if we go over here, what would be an example of ES6? I mean, this, again, works totally fine, but if there were other browsers that we opened up, might be a problem if they didn't understand this syntax. There's going to be a lot of ES6 stuff that not all the browsers understand. So since we're writing code in a browser, we don't want this to be our final result. This code over here, we don't want it to look like this. We want it to write it so that other browsers will understand it. They might not understand the class keywords. They'll only understand it if that browser implements ES6. Okay? So how do I get ES6 here? There's a couple of things that I'm going to need to do. Okay? Again, you're going to do this a bunch of times, but there's a program called Babel. And Babel ends up getting used. Babel is the tool. Webpack packs, Babel will transpile. Babel will transpile your ES6 code into non-ES6 code. Okay? So there's 4 modules now we looked at. there's HTTP server, there's Webpack. Now we're going to look at Babel. Okay? Babel split itself up so that the two things that you need from Babel, there's actually going to be 3 packages we're going to need. Again, wouldn't expect you to memorize this yet, but you will. I'm going to install Babel core, Babel Loader, which is really what we want. We want the loader, but we also want the core of Babel. Okay? And I also want to bring in the thing that's going to transpile ES6. This is Babel preset ES 2015. Again, I've done this 1,000 times, so I memorized that, but could go back and watch the video. And I'm going to save. Now, I'm going to go back in to my Webpack config, because now I have to tell my Webpack config, hey, listen, I want you to transpile these files from ES6. And what this is going to allow me to do, well, in order to do this, what I have to specify, and again, this is not nearly as intuitive, is you have to say there's a module here, and I've got some loaders. Okay? Well, what do you want to load? Okay? What files do you want me to load? And so this test says, I'm going to give you the pattern of the files you want to load. Any file that ends in JS. This is a regular expression. Okay? I'm escaping out the dot. I'm saying JS, $ means it's the end. Any file, okay, when you're going to start at the index, any other files that it needs, including the JS file, okay, I want you to basically use this loader on. What loader do you want me to use? Well, we want you to use Babel, okay? So you're going to use Babel. This will end up using the Babel Loader, which we have. And we've also got Babel Core, which is going to do some of the work. And since we want to end up using ES6, this, again, is syntax that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But notice we installed a preset. So basically, we say the presets we want to use, ES 2015. All right? Now, when we go and run this, what it's going to end up doing, if it works, again, I'm not saying that it's negligible, but it's not 400 lines of code. Okay? And what do we get out of these 17 lines of code? Now we could go in here, and if I run my npm run start dev again, unexpected token, so let's see, I do this all the time. So loaders is a collection of loaders, so each of these has to be an object. You can't just take an array and put in object syntax, right? Because you could have multiple loaders. You might have loaders that load CSS and that sort of thing. So let me kill this and run it again. Now it's running. And now if I go back here and I scroll down here, notice what it did. It basically got rid of the class, and now this is safe for any browser to use. Now I could do some interesting things here. Okay? So one of the things that I could do here is if I wanted to separate this out a little bit, and this is kind of where things get cool, I could go in here and I could say import foo from /foo. Okay? What this is going to do is this is Webpack. Webpack is going to go in. Okay? By the way, import is ES6. Okay? Import is ES6. Babel's going to end up using my ES6. It's going to go and it's going to try to find this file. Okay? This gives me the ability to separate out files. Now again, if I went to do this, and I go and I look at my code here, it's going to tell me that it can't find this file. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to put in foo.js. And I'm going to export it. Okay? You could export more than one thing from a file, but if the thing that I want to export is the default thing, I could say export default class foo. Now if I go back here, this will end up running. Okay? And if I want my foo to say hi, well, first of all, I could give my foo a constructor. I could pass my foo a name. Okay? And I could say console, excuse me, I could say this dot name equals name. Okay? And I could put in a function called say hi. And this will say console.log, and I could use some ES6 magic to say, hi, my name is, and use the $sign for interpolation, this dot name. So you see this backtick here? This is ES6. The backticks basically, under the covers, the backticks say, hey, look, I'm going to do some concatenation here. What are you going to concatenate? See the $sign? It's going to look for the variable this dot name. Okay? Does it take a little time getting used to using the backticks? Sure. Okay? Once I end up doing this, I could save it, go back over here, and say const, okay, there's another ES6, foo equals new foo bar. And now I could say foo, say hi. And I could go back here, this reloads, hi, my name is bar. Okay? Just for the sake of argument, to beat a dead horse a little bit, just so you could see what this does, just for the sake of it, if I wanted to, I could go over here and say import bar from /bar.
Don't they usually have like brackets when they do import? Like
Only for named imports. And we'll get to that eventually. Okay? And now I could go in here and I could say bar.js. Okay? Again, I'm not doing anything with that. But what you're seeing here is the fact that you could use ES6. I'll show you one more ES6 goodie here. Let's say that you were, just for the sake of argument, let's say we were going in here and we were passing an object in here. Name is bar. By the way, I could run this, but I'll get a little bit of a wacky response here because now when I do foo and I go over here, I'm not using this bar at all, but I'm passing in an object for name, right? Hi, my name is object. Not right, right? So there's a couple of different ways I could solve this. I could go over here and say, really, I'm passing in an object, and this is object.name. And then I could go over here, reload this again, and I'm back in business. Okay? Or I could use some ES6 goodness, which you're going to see. And this is a kind of destructuring. It says, hey, look, I know you're passing me in some object. The only thing that I want to pull out of there is the name. And I want to put it in this variable called name. So weird syntax. But it allows you to pull out from an object whatever you want from that object. And now you can basically go over here and you'd be back to where you were before. And this works as well, just to make sure, let's just make sure we're not looking at something cached, which I don't think we are, because I think we're running this correctly. We do that. And this works as well. So I'm going to have an assignment for you tomorrow that involves some of this stuff. But this is, again, basic introduction into some Webpack and ES6. Again, the Webpack config, if you had to memorize it, you do it 5-6 times, you'll screw up. I screwed up when I put in the loader. I forgot to put the object around the individual loader. In terms of what your package JSON file looks like, here's our Webpack. Fairly simple. It's just basically going into the node modules and finding that Webpack file. Here's this script that basically is going to run Webpack, make sure it's being watched, Because as you're developing, you want to watch it, any change, you want it to basically recompile. Okay? And then simultaneously, we want to start our server, and we don't want our server caching.
With what you just showed us throughout this video is running within my silly projects directory. So this will be exclusively a container. That directory is exclusively a container for this.
And that's
stuff.
that's the way but that's only because that's the way that HTTP server works.
And any directories I pull off of it, let's say I do a tree of directories where they all.
Sure, that's not a problem either. I mean,
So
anything
trapped-
underneath it, anything that's underneath it.
So I can do what like we have Git. I have a Git repository directory, and I have all my Git stuff in there.
You could run a HTTP server. You know, we're only using HTTP server until we end up using Express. Okay, but this was a basic server. I probably could have gotten away without a server, frankly. I probably just could have opened it up as a file. But I always like to have a server running. It always seems weird when you click on an HTML file and say just, you know, it has the file structure in the browser. I don't know, it just always seemed weird to me.
And I have one last question.
Go ahead.
Follow-up question. So, and this, what you just showed us, was really because I wouldn't have had a clue. I still don't have a clue until I watch this whole video again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's giving us an introduction to this environment so that we can do stuff with it that we really don't know yet.
That's right. It's giving you an introduction. Some people have asked about ES6, and I'm going to give you a project that's going to involve setting up a web server and creating a file and creating a constructor for something that does some stuff. Now, again, you don't have to do it in ES6, but now you see how to do it in ES6, you might as well try to get it working in ES6 because, again, it's not. How many steps did we take to go through it? I don't know. Maybe there was 10 steps that we took. It's not that much. Again, you're going to have to go back and look and see what the dependencies were. The reason why I do it is that when we get into React, you're going to often find that when you go through a lot of tutorials, you see these things, they'll start out with not 4 packages, but 10 packages. You don't need that much. If we were doing React, we would need maybe 1 or 2 more packages. Okay? Again, we've got this, we need Babel Loader. If you sort of think about it, we need Babel Loader because that's going to be loading our Babel. I guess we need the Babel core too. They split these things out. We need the preset for ES 2015. That's a preset. That means what it's going to do is it's going to process the files. So while it's going through Webpack, it's going to process those files, and it's going to turn the ES6 stuff into ES5 stuff, which is helpful. Again, it allows you, not a lot of all the browsers would recognize the spread operators and that sort of thing. We'll go into ES6 as we get along, because it's stupid not to. It's so important as we get into React that it's crazy not to start looking at it. When we look at some of these other workshops, it's going to be important as well. So anyway, let me stop recording this. I'll save it.